Hello everybody. I'm going to talk about CSCM2. So this is Peter Wilcox, as you know, and we've already talked about CSCM1. And why don't we go over the little cheat sheet I have in the back of the book you have or here on the screen. With CSCM1, which is the first generation of going bigger than HVID to design contact lenses for the corneal molding eye, CS, corneoscleral, CM, corneal mold, we went a lot larger and played around with the pink ball as to where it's going to lie and how much we're going to lift up this edge, worrying so much about bearing in the periphery. And mind you, going through all this, there were a lot of oopses along the way until we came up with the details of the already discussed CSCM1, which is 6.268 HVID, 0.4 less to find your pink ball, and moving this around to get around 39 degrees, and all the discussion that surrounded that. So what's different with CSCM2? Well, CSCM2 came about by the reality that making something just bigger than the HVID works as well without some of the problems with going too large. If the goal is to have a stable lens on the eye, don't have a lens shimmying around. And if you can get that done with 1.5, then why go 2.5? I do both to this date, and I do tend to have smaller ADs to my lenses. And let's go through this. 6.268. Apex just touching on the flat axis, 1 to 2.5 bigger with this CSCM2, and now it tends to be like 1.5 to maybe 2. The power, just do the math and take the lens down. If you have a 42 diopter K in a 2 diopter prescription, 42 minus 2 is 40 minus another 1 or so makes it 39 to 39.5, and keep that power there on your power and your topo demand. The red ball 6.2, blue ball 6.8. The treatment zone, the area where the lens is going to be pushing on the eye, you can what you want to do is you want to try to get this flat and consistent and as large as you want to, depending upon if you want to have myopia control. You want to cheat it over to the left to where you have some plus getting into the pupil, and if you're worried about glare and flare, you move it over here, and you do that by having it out of the blocks with the RSIM lens. Maybe you're playing with your shape factors and your sphericity, or your B, blending it or not blending it. And edge angle 39 or so, 39, 40, 41, it all depends. And you can't go wrong shooting for 40 and go from there. Limbal clearance around 25 microns. So we have the PowerPoint that you can look at in just talking about these things. Get your manual Ks, find your flat K, get about 10 topographies, use Unisol in the eye, some non-preserved saline, and get the best stinking topo you can. And usually you're going to find tighten it up by finding the manual Ks you like that are 3.06 millimeters and matching it up with your topography sim Ks. It's usually the case. Usually the best topography is the best one just by looking at it, the cleanest one. Looking at the overall diameter, breaking this thing up into units so that you're always working with something in this range helps you build your fitting set, and you can look over that yourself. Finding the base curve, or where this red ball is going to be, is a simple matter of that math we were talking about, and this example is in the PowerPoint, and you want to have about a half to a diopter of plus over top of this spherical RX, and in this one is greater right here. And what you do is you'd bring this down, and you're going to trust that when you're designing this thing that you're going to have a power that's going to be about a diopter here. Now You can go a little bit less, a little bit more. Don't get too crazy about that. But what you're doing is you're going to have your apex just slightly above. And here we're cheating ahead here a little bit. If you move this down, that's touching, and this is one click up. And that's all you're going to have when the lens is designed and done. About a diopter of power and one click above, and you're going to trust that all the math works, that your refraction was correct, the K's are right, the topography is right, and then you're going to use your landing zone, and you're going to modify that around into where you're going to change over and under corrections by moving your pink ball up, moving your pink ball in, and very infrequently moving your red and blue balls laterally. Now when we're talking about the red ball here, the optic zone, the lift of the optic zone is a base curve generator, and the diameter left and right is the treatment zone influencer. If you move this thing back over here, if you just play around with this stuff, we're at 6.2 now, we bring it in, and it's going to move this over here, your treatment zone, and you move it out to 6.3, and it's going to move it that way. So it typically at 6.2 is the desired lateral placement of it, and vertically you're going to be affecting your power by moving that up. So lift is base curve generator, and it's again 6.2 to 6.8 typically. Blue ball right here is the IC, the intermediate curve. The lift affects the sag. You're pushing this down. If we look at the fluorescein map here, you're pushing this down, and we'll see that it's going to keep jacking up and increasing the sag there. And so that's you're going to get changes there. It is the pivot point of the seesaw of the apex versus the mid-periphery. So if you push that down there, if you look at this, if we keep pushing this up here, it's going to start lifting the periphery. So if you think of it as a teeter-totter, the more you go up, the more this goes up, the more you go down, the more you push in the landing zone. So when we're looking at the blue ball, it's usually 6.8. You can move it in and out, especially if you're making a toric lens. The 6.2, 6.8, one meridian 90 degrees away could be 5.6, 6.2. And you know how that all works if you work with toric lenses. But if you think about the down and out, if you move it up, it goes. If you move it vertically upward, you reduce the apical clearance. If you move it downward, you're pushing the pressure out, so like a third nerve, down and out. Quick way to remember that, but you know this just by toggling around. And I'm constantly fiddling with these lenses. If I believe my topography, the green line is accurate, then I should be able to make changes to the lens design in such a way that I should get the results that the software repeatedly gives me when I'm dispensing various lenses to various people over time. So please go through the slides, and I'm skipping through them and moving these slides in and out in order to give you a design window to look at while we're talking about the notes that were presented. So let's talk about the treatment zone. Right here, the treatment zone. The typical thing to do is to have an RSIM lens and no B and no S. And you look at this thing and you go, well, I've got a white ring here, and that looks pretty nice. I do have a large area here of change. There's a steep reverse curve. Now this person is -6, -2.25, and you start worrying about what happens when you go off in the two axes as you're scanning back and forth. But there's a whole lot of good to say of starting off with the least complicated lens and moving from there. But looking at this, we have what the rolling hills of this reverse curve, and if we're to push the B button, to engage that, you can see how steep this is. I call these skyscrapers, okay? So it's harder, but look at the difference here in this treatment zone this way versus without that, and this can be the difference between flare for the patient and not. And when you do engage B, you tend to get a little bit more push in the lens, and you might have a plus over refraction. So do be careful to respect the fact that there's more energy here and being placed in the treatment zone. and maybe you back off a little bit on your push. We're at 121 here right now. But so we're starting at R. We're just trying to decide if we're going to push B or not. And so, if you look at this topography, there's a whole lot of symmetry here and not much. Even though you have 2 diopters a cylinder, there's not a whole lot of asymmetries here. So why have G? Because G makes us feel better. Because when we're looking at this, we go, look at that, I like that. And when we don't have G and we have R, we tend to go, oh my gosh, that thing's sticking so far off the eye, it's going to be a disaster. And folks, frequently it is not. So don't be afraid of starting with R. I pay a lot of attention to whether we're white here or not. If we go to G, we get a little bit more white, and if we go back to R here and we push B, we get, that's a significant change here. But we still in R have this big offset here, and you just have to learn to get your flat axis correct. And maybe we're going to move this up here a little bit, and then just let the chips fall where they may here, and go from there. So flat axis, we're gonna, since we're digging into the corner here, we're gonna go down, down, okay, and here we go. And this would be a completed design and a GSIM lens with a B button pushed. And we haven't even talked about S yet. So let's talk about the S value. Now, I will show you Steve Koger did a fantastic job, and I'll show you in a second where you should spend a lot of time listening to his description, so I won't repeat that. But in this one slide here, basically in these minus lenses, you're going to have plus S factors. So if we were to go back to this lens, this design here, we're going to RSIM lens with a B, and let's go look at the back surface, and let's put in some plus factors here. And we have pushed a little bit harder here, and we have this change. Let's take it off, and you're going to ask yourself, if I were a lens, what kind of effect would I have here? And you see that there's greater push in that center area with this positive S factor, and by that much. Okay, now let's go up to 20.2. Here we go. And now you have this difference here. You go, well, why is 10 that and 20 is this? You're going to sit here and you're going to play around with these things. If you uncheck your B and you have this S in there, you go, whoa, that's not working out right. Don't feel there's a cookbook way of doing this, and walk through your steps. Have your little cheat sheets next to you to make sure that you go through in the proper path. So the purpose is to create the straightest or flattest posterior surface or line to create the largest area of even and wide push. Okay, and that's when you're going to engage S. And don't feel there's a cookbook way of engaging S that is going to always work for you, whether you're in R and G. In talking about the pink ball and the black ball, the pink ball gives you the edge lift and the bevel position, and the black ball gives you bevel lift. The goal is limbal clearance, about 25 microns of limbal clearance at the caliper HVID. So when you're going across, we have, and don't, feel free to go across from time to time and look at your HVID and ask yourself if you're pushing at the limbus or not. When you're making a lens that's slightly larger than HVID, you may have less clearance at the limbus, and the goal is edge lift. And do you have this edge lift to get the fluorescein underneath the lens or not? And so don't get hung. Remember, there's a fluorescein view here that if you have a good topography, and you can trust this glow on here to be pretty accurate as to what you're going to get on the result. And there's a little bit more glow up here, but we did have a toric lens by 2.25 diopters. So first, vertically move the black ball up and down to obtain a 39-degree edge angle. And then go look at your back surface and see if you have this flatness here, and and you'll see there's a 30. If you look over here where these they pop up, there's 34 diopters, 0.34 diopters rather, right there, and you see how far this is moved over here. So you can move this. Maybe you want to scooch this over here to where you get some more clearance at your HVID, and so you're going to start moving these balls around here, and do this usually on the flat axis, and go back and forth, and you'll see this creep along. So when I'm designing, I'm constantly going from this screen to this screen to this screen to this screen to see as I change one, I affect the other. This is the link that I spoke of, so take that down. It's on the Wave site, and you go in there, and Steve does a very good job speaking of things pertaining to S and B, and you can look at my notes, and you can, between all of those, you'll understand better why they work and how they work and when do you engage them. So I have two cases here. This middle lens design here applies to the first case I'll talk about. This is a 13-year-old guy who has a prescription of -3 with just a splash of astigmatism. I ended up in this case having a little bit more edge apical clearance than I usually have. The power is +8.1, a little bit over 1, and I engaged the B button on this. And so let's see why I did this. So I started off at RSIM, and with RSIM, his HVID was 11.2 or so, and so I went to 12.4. I had this RSIM lens, and I looked at this and said, I've got this pinkish ring here. Do I think this is going to work for me? And do I like the reverse curve here? Do I think I'm going to get 3 diopters taken out of this? And I'm not so sure about it. So I didn't run over to GSIM because it's a symmetrical eye. Why make a GSIM lens and if you don't have to? And so I pushed B, and I've got my skyscrapers going on here. I go, okay, I got white, I got my skyscrapers. I also, in pushing B, I moved my treatment zone over more. If you look at that, boom, it goes over more. Now, why would I want to have a treatment zone that would be here when I can have one that goes to there? And so on my fluorescein, I have one of my clearance here. I have 40.7 on that, and that's fine with me. I may have toggled up and down on the black ball. I'm smaller. I'm not 2.5 bigger. Remember, I'm a little bit bigger than HVID. So on the CSCM1, I may be at 27. Down here, I may be flat to none. Okay, and going back, my base curve. Okay, I was just talking about having this thing a little closer to the eye and bringing the blue ball down to where it just touches, and in this design I was up a couple clicks. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter much. So I've got that here. I have my 6268. I have a sometimes I'll sit here and look at this fluorescein and say, do I think I have enough glow underneath here that I'm going to end up with good glow on my lens when it's on the eye? See, there's more glow here when you don't engage B, but I also have this very soft rolling hill here for this reverse curve. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to make a deal with myself that I want to have a white ring on this 3 diopters, and then toggle back and forth and say, do I believe this is going to be good enough for this person? If I'm going to move this up to, go back to my flat axis, if I'm going to move this up here and just move it way up there to get more of a glow here, do I think, and now what's my edge angle going to be? Come on, 39.4. Okay, so I can do that, and but I found I haven't had to do that. So down here where I was, some area right around in here, and I have a successful case. I have this lens on the eye of this guy who's -3, and he's happy. So that's case 1 of using R and B and no S. Here is the second case of this uh, two topographies above here. In order to save some room on the screen, I have just a left eye pre-mold and molded eye of this 9-year-old Asian female who is actually a referral from Nick Despotito's to me. They found him due to social media and friends, and he said, hour and a half is a lot better than a 3 hour trip or whatever it would have been from their Richmond location. But so because I tinker, okay, and you should, I made her right lens an R-SIM with B, and the left lens a G-SIM and no B. And she came in today, and both of her eyes, I mean, holy cow, -6, -2.25, and she's plano. Actually, in the right eye, she's plano. In the left eye, she's +1, and they're one big happy family. And we had to go over some insertion removal and some other things, but everything is working out really well. This is the first mold visit. I saw her here, got the stuff, mailed it to her. She came back in here 6 days after starting wearing them on home, and this is what we have. So the point is, this G-SIM lens I made worked, and this R-SIM with B lens worked equally well. And so let's go look at what I would have done or did when I was making this lens. So when I started with this R-SIM lens, I have HVID plus 1.3 or 1.4, whatever this issue is, about 11.2, I believe. And I was looking at this thing going, I don't like this curve. I've got 6, 7, 8 and a quarter diopters to remove, and I have this going on, and I had it's way off the eye here. And so what I did was I engaged B, and I have that, and I went from the B off. I have curves and that green line crossing over here, and B engaged. I moved this way over on this young patient's eye. 12.4 is equal to comfort, and so I chose to do that. Now, when you go look at this fluorescein, people get all scared, going, "How can you have a fluorescein that looks like that at the 90 degree?" And it's because it all works out. So an R-SIM on a toric eye like this, you're going to always have this with the rule eye to have this much offset here. It's okay. Get on your flat axis, make the lens, look at your flat axis here, know that the lens is going to rotate around in a circle. What is going to make a lens that, with a topography like this, if you made a G-SIM, what is going to make it align here? I don't believe that, even though I did this over here. It's a matter of, I know it's going to rotate around, and it's going to average out and give me what I want. Okay, so this lens here, making an R-SIM lens with B, no S, gave me good results. And this one right here, this lens took this eye and turned it into that eye by going like 1.3 or so larger than HVID. And in this case, I started off with R, and I had the same trepidation looking at this. And I said, what happens if I just click over here and go to G? And what do I get? And I have this, it's nice and dark here. I have my skyscrapers without engaging B. Now I could have gone over here and engaged B and gotten that, but instead I did this, which snugged it down, and I got the results that are pictured right here by doing this. And that is the thought process I go through. So if she comes in and on day one I have a totally different result going from right eye to left eye, I know in my notes that I'm going to favor the design choice that I decided to do. So I did push a little bit more on this, and again, it's rules of thumb, guys. Usually the power over here, I respected the 1 diopter rule, okay, over flat K. In this one, I kicked it up a little bit more because of a high power, and I'd rather, and you know what? Matter of fact, she was overcorrected by a 3/4 of 1 diopter today, and look what I did. I went too much, and I got too much. So if I would have done what I speak about and would have been, down here at 105, I would have a better outcome. So, teacher, the cobbler's kids have no shoes. And that's it. So when you start off, you have your topography. You're going to put into your tools, your configuration settings, and whether your configuration settings, I have these different configuration settings for corneoscleral mold, CSCM, default, these hyperopic ortho K, and I modify a lot of my stuff. I'm always changing it out, so I don't save a lot of these things. Here's a hyperopic. This is a Julio design, and I just made one that Paul Levine made recently, and I've made his new hyperopic lens design, and I keep fiddling around back and forth. As you can see, since it says 10.5, I changed that after I designed the lens. That's where we are in making these lenses. I am making a little bit bigger than HVID. I look at going back to this earlier case, I look at my edge angle, one around 39.5 to 41, and now when this is CSCM 2. I like my white rings. I like my back curves. I like my skyscrapers. I like my flat peripheries out here on this back surface. And that's about it. You don't be afraid of having a lens that looks like this, because you're going to apply the logic of walking through the case of saying, okay, I'm going to have an RSIM, and I'm going to look at this, I'm going to look at that, I'm going to decide if I like it, and then maybe you go over to B, and with the S that was discussed in the Conquer video and in my notes, you'll see why we do and don't engage S on these. Okay, I thank you, and y'all enjoy and shoot out some emails if you need to.